Morning, good morning.
Shalom Aleichem.
All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas, Perek Sheni. Today will be the last daf of Perek Sheni. We are learning Halacha Ches and going on to the final Halacha test, the final mission of this chapter. In the Ois V'Hadr's edition, we are learning Daf Lamed Aleph. We left off on Daf Lamed Amid Beis by the two dots, Rabbi Yasa. We are dedicating this class for the immediate releasing of all of our Shavuyim, for the success of the IDF and for all of the Jewish people. Amen. We're going to begin by learning the final story of an Amoira, here in this case, Rabbi Yasa, that moved from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. And this is already the third story, how people, the locals in Eretz Yisrael, let's say, poked fun at them. And there were real consequences because of that. And then we're going to move into the final Mishnah. And even though we touched upon this in Halacha Vav, in our Gemara and Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis, right, that Rabbi and Gamliel recited the Shema after he got married, but now we're going to dive into the Mishnah proper, which is a Machlokes Tanoim, whether the Chassan who's exempt from reciting the Shema, whether he's allowed to say the Shema or not. Now, why would he not be allowed to say the Shema? Like, what would be the issue? So as it becomes clear, as we'll learn the Charedim, and we'll learn later the Gemara, when we learn the Gemara, that when someone is exempt of doing something, and the person makes an effort to nonetheless do it, there are times where we say these are the words that chayshin and liyuhara, that we don't want for the person to give off the appearance that they are arrogant, if there are certain behaviors that are only done by chavedim, and a person is not a chaver, or by a Talmud Chacham, the person is not a Talmud Chacham, right? There were certain garments that people in Bavel wore, only the Talmid Chachamim. In our culture, right, in Lubavitch, right, do you wear a kapata during the week, just as an example? So if a person is a big Rav, he would do so, a big Rosh Yeshiva. If a person was not on that level, should he do it or not? That's the topic, Chayshin and Liyuhara, Loy Chayshin and Liyuhara. This is a topic that we also had in the Bavli. And the Gemara here in the Yerushalmi, unique in the Yerushalmi, would give a very, there's a very logical differentiation between cases where we'll be allowed to do it, Adarabba, how great is it? You're going beyond the letter of the law. And where there is an issue of Yuhara, where you're not allowed to do it, there's a Machlokes Tanoim. And ultimately, what we'll see unique in today's shir is that sometimes you have two conflicting rules as to how to paskin when we learn Mishnayos. On one hand, we already mentioned this, Yochid v'Rabim, Halachic Rab. What happens if Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote a Mishnah without attributing that din in the Mishnah to its author? That's called a Stam Mishnah. But what happens when we know that the Stam Mishnah is only Das Yochid? Will we say, well, Stam Mishnah, we paskin like that Mishnah? No. Stam Mishnah, that's a Das Yochid, and we don't paskin like that. That will be really the underlying theme behind the final topic in this Perek. If we'll have time, doesn't have to be that way, then we'll move on to the third chapter. But I think, without rushing, we should properly learn today's daf, meaning learning it slower. And again, daf lamed amid base, 3 lines before the bottom of the amid. And now we're moving on to Rabbi Yasa. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yasa, katzelik lohacha, when Rabbi Yasa moved here to the Holy Land, the first thing he did upon his arrival is Azar Sapar. He went to get a haircut. He went to a barber. Why did he go to a barber? So first of all, trips today, right, miraculous compared to how they were then. A trip then took a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. It definitely took a couple of weeks. While a person is traveling, they had no access to a certain type of hygiene and grooming. And as the Charedim writes, 5 lines from the bottom of the Amid, or 7 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Azar Sapar halach legaleach. He went to shave off his hair. Shederech ho'ish haba miderech harucha. That was the norm. That when you come from a long trip, Ligaleach, as we learn in Moed Katan. Imagine that even though that normally one may not take a haircut on Chol HaMoed, but you have exceptions. Exceptions will be people that were unable to take a haircut prior to Yom Tif. One of the examples the Mishnah gives, Habam Medina Sayam, was even then, if I remember correctly, when we learned this in the Babli, there was a toisvis. Sometimes you have on the ship, you have a barber. But the little shifalach, it's crazy how they went on the Mediterranean and rowboats. I mean, they went on boats that many of them were turned over. And when they went to take it out. Not only did he go take a haircut, but boya mischei, he wished to bathe, ba'ahon di moisin to Tiberia, in one of the hot springs of Tiberias. Why did he want to bathe? So here again says the Charedim, Ratza lirchotz b'merchat shel Tiberia lichizu kevadav miges hadar. You go on a trip. Trip is very tiring. He went economy class, even though the guys that went economy class, I understood, had 4 seats. They had a more comfortable, but whatever it is. And he took a haircut and he went to bathe. Now, when he's going into the bathhouse, it was a certain letz, a cynic, a jokester, not a freilich, a person which is amazing, a person who is a cynic. And what he did was, this is not correct, that v'yahav lei pur kitol chad. Pur kitol says the Charedim, pur means a makkah. He gave him a klap, he gave him a zetz, he gave him a slap, and unka means oiref. I'm just reading the Charedim. In other words, he slapped him, he hit him on the back of his neck when he saw him going into the bathhouse and turning to the Amud Aleph, and Amar Lei, and this Leitzon told Rabbi Yasa, Ad Kedoin un Kiseido Gavra Rafya. Your neck is still soft. In other words, Ki'ilu, the goal is to have a firm neck. I'm helping you. I didn't do the job fully. Now you can go into the hot waters. Whatever I didn't resolve with my klap, again, it's similar to what we learned yesterday, right? That he was charged 50, whatever the more money was, and to get a klap. I'll rough you up. It was good. I'm toughing you up. I'm harassing you to make you tough, like this type of logic, evil logic. And that's not okay. Okay, Rabbi Yasser goes into the bathhouse and listen to what God made happen to this Leitz for hitting Rabbi Yasser. Vahava archoina, the word archoina means a judge. There was a judge that was koim, that was standing in a certain place right outside one of these bathhouses in Tiberia. And what was he doing there? Doin achad listim. What's interesting is it appears almost that this was a public judge, a public trial. Well, that's what it was. There was a ganef, there was a robber that was on trial. And va'azal komlei gechif kol kivlei. This lets, he went, it was a public trial. So when he was going to watch the trial, he was still smirking at himself. He was still pleased with himself that he had this gringo, this guy that came from another country. I showed him that in Israel, you got to toughen up. I gave him a clap. He was smiling to himself with the joy that he just harassed Rabbi Yasser. And listen to the Hashgacha Pratis. And he's going to watch. Now, Amalei Archoina, the Amalei was the judge, was interrogating. There's different ways of interrogating. It was not a Western interrogation. It was a Middle Eastern interrogation. That means that the robber, a Russian interrogation, was being beaten, and the judge, what did the judge want to get out of him? He already was moida that he was a robber. The judge knew there was someone else with him. So that's when he got there. The judge was telling him, Manu Ima, who else was with you? And at that moment, it happens in a split second. Tulo Einoi means the Ganef lifted up his eyes. And what did he see? He saw this Letz laughing. He didn't know that the Letz was not laughing at him. The Letz was not rejoicing that he was getting beat. The Letz was laughing on himself that he gave it to that guy. He knocked him on his neck. So it made him upset. When you see someone laughing when you're being beaten, and the judge wants to know who was with you, so Amalei, so the Ganef told the judge, Ahon, the Gochich, the guy that's laughing. He was the guy Havaimi. Perfect. He was arrested. And Vidani, again, the word Vidani means being judged. I would say the word Vidani means he was being interrogated. Kimin Hagam. Now, this guy was not complicit in the crime that the listim was being tried for. But when he was being interrogated and he was asked, what did you do? How did you do? Mitamal, it slipped. The judge got out of him that he actually in the past committed the murder. He confessed that he killed someone. And in between the lines, the robber was sentenced to death. And so was this let's. And it wasn't, again, like in the Western world, that it takes up as 18 years, and then you have another 18 years in death row. They were sentenced to death, and they were being led. When a person was being led, they would be put in chains around their neck. So, me, Nafken Tarvayon, as both of them were going out to get their punishment to be put to death, Te'inen Tarte Shaden, there were two sets of chains being worn, one by the robber and one by this jokester. And all of that happened now. Minda avar Rabbi Yasa mische. That was happening when Rabbi Yasa was leaving the bathhouse. So Rabbi Yasa went into the bathhouse by a guy telling him, listen, I was trying to toughen up your neck. Now it's going to get firm. And he sees how this guy's neck is firm. So Amalei, so the jokester tells Rabbi Yasa, Hahu unkesa dahavarafyo. The neck that really was soft, that needed the toughening up, was not yours. He was apologizing. The neck that was soft was mine. And now, retribution was given to me. Kvar shenitzas. Now, it's constricted. In other words, he acknowledged that he was being punished. Now, as we had in the previous story, question was it because Rabbi Yasa was angry at him? Or was it that God got angry at him? And it was important for these Amoraim to make a point that I was moichel. This is God's punishment. Don't put it on me. And indeed, Armalei, Rabbi Yasa told him that the bish gado, tahahu gado. God, what does God mean? Mazel. That the bish means it's not good. You have a bad mazel. In other words, it's not, don't think that I was the one that had such a kapeda for which this is happening to you. God had a kapeda on you for you hitting me.
That way, if he confesses, he doesn't need witnesses.
The Gemara is not going into the details. The whole thing is strange because
it doesn't make sense. Right. None of it makes sense.
How long can you sit in the bath? When I was learning this yesterday, I was thinking, how long was Rabbi Yasa in the bath?
Right.
He was in the bath for an hour. He was in the bath for an hour and a half. The line came and sits in Auschwitz, which means a guy they was suspected him to be part of a robbery, arresting him, interrogating him, discovering that he was guilty in a murder, and sentencing him and having him in chains and letting all that in an hour and a half. They were quick in Israel. I want to say something. This is not a Jewish court. This is a Roman court.
Oh, got it.
The Romans were very gewurdig, huh? So Vlad understands the whole story. Makes sense. Hour and a half was a bit too much. Maybe he needed 15 minutes less. The judge was compassionate. Like, okay, it was a different, okay, say that. And the Loik Siv does it not say, and according to Pasuk in Yeshaya, Va'ata altis loitzotzu. Don't be a let's, don't be cynical. I witnessed that. That cynicism is like the beginning of the end. Why? Pen yachsaku moisreichem. Because your restraints will become strong. The restraints was in reference to the chains around his neck. And the Gemara goes on to say that Rav Pinchas, and for some reason we have this continuously in the Yerushalmi. The first two, you don't have b'shem. I don't know, there has to be a reason for that. Rav Pinchas, it's not Rav Pinchas and Rabbi Yirmiyah. Maybe that's what it means. Or it means Rav Pinchas in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. The word says, B'chlalo doesn't say in the Yerushalmi, that Kashi HaLitzonos, that the Litzonos is very detrimental. Shetchilasa Yisurim, and minimally, the first divine reaction is that the person that lets, right, has Yisurim. But if that person doesn't do tshuva, then at the end, Pashat, the person won't exist, he'll be annihilated. Tchilas in Yisurim, the pasuk that we just quoted in Yeshayahu, va'alta altis loitzatzu, because if you will pen yachziku moisrecha. Moisrecha means constraints. And the constraints, the Yisurim, the Mitzrayim will become strong on that person. But in that pasuk, it says right afterwards, v'soifen koloi dichsiv, ki cholam v'nechratza shomati me'es adnai elikim tzavakis al kol haaretz. For a total annihilation I have heard concerning the entire land, and indeed made this pasuk come to fruition in its entirety today in the Matzav and Eretz Yisrael and all of our enemies. Amen. Okay, final sugya of the Perek, right? Halachis, that's how it's called over here. We're going into Halacha 9. Yes, we are referring back to what we learned here in our Ois V'Hadar edition of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Rule number 1 is that when a chassan gets married, prior for him doing the Maisa, because of the difficulty and him having proper kavanah, he's exempt of saying the Shema, as we learned above. That the Mishnah doesn't have to repeat. Now you should know like this, that generally, when a person has issues on their mind, if a person, let's say, has a business deal and their mind is preoccupied, the first counter that halacha will tell him is make an effort, distract yourself from your business and have kavanah. Just to make it clear, the reason why by Shema we don't say that is because his tirda of the chassan is a tirda of a mitzvah. Just I want to add those words in. But since getting married is a mitzvah, or machlek is really rishonim, having children is a mitzvah, that's biblical, no debate about that. And to get married, the Jew has to be married, not have children out of marriage. So this guy is preoccupied with the be'ilah shel mitzvah. So ha'isik of a mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah. Now, nevertheless, what did we learn? We learned that's above, that the Rabban Gamliel said the Shema. And remember that the Amru, the Chachamim told him, didn't you tell us otherwise? Now we're going to really understand the back and forth. And wait until the back and forth until we finish the Perek on Daf Lamed Aleph on the base. What's the question of our Mishnah? I know we know a story. Let's shelve the story. No one debates that a chassan is exempt. The question is, if someone says to himself, I know that I'm exempt because I'm doing a mitzvah, but I am going to attempt to put away my worry, whatever that worry was. We learned 2 opinions, and I'm going to have kavanah when I say the Shema. That sounds like a great thing. Like, why not? The why not is because there are many times where we say that the machmed, sometimes halachas is the machmed is a chassid shaita. Here the words will be yuhara. Yuhara means you're boasting, you're showing off. You're not shaykh to that level, and you're behaving in a way like you're the big guy. That's something that's not appropriate. It looks like you're arrogant. Or you are, it's an act of arrogance. It's not an act of devotion. It's an act of arrogance. It's disingenuous. That's going to be a machlokes in our mission. Let's read it inside. And I want you to know that Balai Lo Harishin, even though we learned before, right? How many nights is he exempt from? 4 nights. Why does it say Balai Lo Harishin? My friends, because Balai Lo Harishin is the mitzvah of Be'ilas. When a person gets married, they should not be delaying it for 4 nights. The Laila Rishon means before the Maisa. The Maisa is going to happen. It should happen. The Laila Rishon. So before he has the Be'ilah Shal Mitzvah, says the Tanakama. Now the Tanakama, that's what we're going to get to. Let's go with this Adas Rabbi. Or it's certainly Stam Mishnah. There's no name. Certainly a Stam Mishnah. That he may do so. However, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Loi kol haroitza little es Hashem Yitoil. What's so important when you read the Mishnah is that the word shame doesn't mean God's name. It's very important. The word shame means a good name for yourself. I'm not mechoyev, aber ich tu epis. Look at me. Not everyone that wants to take for themselves a good name is allowed to do it. I just want to read inside the Charedim, even though we're gonna have these words in the Gemara. Look inside the Charedim in the Mishnah. The Tanakama Savar. Tanakama means it's taka one Tana. It's a stam. We're not concerned with Yohara. But Abshua Gamliel Savar, the Chashinon. That is the Machloikes. Now, we had this sugya in Pesachim. We're not going to go into the whole sugya over there. The Gemara in Pesachim points out that there is a stira between this Mishnah here in Brachas, Tanakama, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, with another topic, which also is connected to Chayshin and Liyohara or Loy Chayshin and Liyohara over there in Pesachim, and the same Tanakama and Gamliel take opposite approaches. That's an issue. One of the answers the Gemara gives in Pesachim is that it's called Muchlefes Hashita. Remember that expression from the Bavli? Muchlefes Hashita means is that you have to change who said what. Our Gemara doesn't have such an option. We're going to keep to these names. The Tanakama, remember, the Tanakama holds Loy Chayshina. Rashbag holds Chayshin and Liyohara. This is the machlokes of our Mishnah. Okay, says the Gemara. Where else do we find the concept of Chayshin and Liyohara? And really, the whole sugya that we're not quoting in depth over there from Pesachim about the stira is resolved by this brayso. And this brayso, which is not authored by Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, but it would be a great source for him. He will be siding with this brayso, will give a certain logic when yeah and when not, because it's not a other yeah, other nicht. It depends when. And says the brayso, Tani, azoy steht in a brayso. Kol davar shuhu shel tzar. Kol davar shuhu shel tzar, says the Charedim, look inside the first Charedim. Remember in Tainus, that when it comes to the first 3 fast days, remember there's 3 sets of fast days, right? 3, and then 3 gedenks, and guys, and then 7. So when it comes to the first 3, what does it say over there? That's not to be, the commoner is not mechuyev to fast. Only the great people fasted the first 3 times. What happens if a stamayid, people, I also want to fast. You could, there's no yuhara, because you're doing something that's giving you tsar, you're fasting. Another example says the Charedim. Let's say when it comes to cholamoyed work, right? Sometimes you have a heter to work. Then the great people still wouldn't work. The person says, you know what? I'm going to behave like the greater people. Okay? You could, the Bryce is saying there's no yuhara because you're paying the price for it. If it would only be to show off, you wouldn't do it. You're striving to have a higher level. You're trying to grow in your Yiddishkeit. You're giving up something. That's okay. Then the din is, keep your finger in the Charedim. We'll learn the Charedim throughout. We have enough time. So, kol haroitza lasais atzma yachid. The word yachid says the Charedim is a lashon that the Braisa is borrowing from Tainus. There we spoke about the first 3 fast days. The Mishnah there says that he's chilu hayechidim lihisanois. So if you want to behave like those yechidim, like those special yechidim, you can do so. If you want to behave like a Talmud Chacham, what's the case of a Talmud Chacham? Where can you work on Tisha B'Av? That's the sugya that we had the stira over there in Pesachim and Babel. Are you allowed to work in Tisha B'Av? The Mishnah began by telling you it's talig b'minig hamak. And if you live in a place where people work on Tisha B'Av, you can go to work. And then the Mishnah says that a Talmud Chacham, even if he lives b'makim that people go to work, he also doesn't go to work. What happens if a person is not a Talmud Chacham? And he says, you know what? I don't want to work on Tisha B'Av. You can do that. You know why? Because you're giving up money. You're having tsar by behaving like the Talmud Chacham. The Braisa says, there's no, the other side of your look, you're showing off, it's fine. You can do it. Anything that brings a sacrifice, Gavaldic logic, you can do it. And not only that, however, look what he writes, reciting the Shema v'chasim. Why is it Shel Shvach? Because everyone knows that when you get married that night, you don't have to say the Shema. It's not tsar to say the Shema. You're not losing money by saying the Shema. What are you getting? You're only getting the compliment, ooh, Gebakuk, this chassan is doing something, even though he doesn't have to do it.
Why is it publicized?
Because very good. Obviously, it's very good. Kavan is adding a nuance that according to this Braisa, Adarab, it's making it clear that if you were to do it in private, there's no issue. It's only by Marasayin do we say that anything that's also because of Marasayin is also afilu b'chadri chadar, not by Yuhara. Yuhara means do things in Kavan. We grew up right in Lubavitch with all these stories about great Hasidim that they had certain Hasidim, they fasted Mondays and Thursdays, but they did it in private. And you know these stories that there was a chassid for 30 years, he never ate on Monday and Thursday. One time it slipped out of his wife to a neighbor's wife, how her husband, she respected her husband. You know, my husband, oh, he's fasting today. This chassid, or when he washed on a sandwich and he went to the window that everyone should see him eating. It shouldn't be yuhara. And by the way, he was tzad not to eat. Fasting is an Indian shal tzad. Yeah, very good. Okay, back over here. But cultural shvach, then this brisa, and by the way, this brisa is not the Tanakh of our Mishnah. This brisa is aligned with Rabbi Shimon and Gamliel. In public, like everyone else, you daven Shema by Maidav, by a wedding, Maidav, the chassan joined. So a chassan was told, don't join. If you want to behave like a yachid, you can. If you want to behave like a Talmud Chacham, you cannot. With one exception. The one exception is Elam Kain Minu Oise Parnas Al Tzivu. The Talmud Chacham is also in reference, like we mentioned, there was certain garments today with Tziriya Kapata that only a Talmud Chacham would wear. You're not sacrificing anything to wear it. You're not allowed to wear it. Don't. But with one exception, that if you were appointed to be the community president, even though you're not shaykh to wear a kapata the whole day, or let's even say you were appointed to be a rabbi, there we can say it's taka not you, but because of the office that you hold, that's okay. But if you don't have that position of being some sort of communal leader, then you're not allowed to do it. And this, the Gemara is bringing this brisa, not ketana chama fakir, that even Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel won't always say that loy kol rotza litil shemita. That's the answer that really the Gemara is giving. That Psachim and Bavli, the question is, there it says that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that if a person doesn't want to do malach on Tisha B'Av, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, good, let him go beyond the letter of the law. Here Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying loy kol rotza Hashem. That's really an answer. It's an answer that the Bavli doesn't even give. Yeah, because over there you're giving up. You have tzad. You want to give up, that's fine. If you pay the price to go beyond, fine. If you're not paying a price, you're only getting the covet of something that you're not there yet. Don't do that. Beautiful. Okay. Says the Gemara. Tani we learned in the Bryce. First of all, there's a halach. And really, we learned, guys, that there were 10 stipulations. It's called the Asara or Eser Tonoyim. Shehisna Yeshua, that when he conquered the land and he gave the land to the Jewish people, there were certain permits that he gave because it has communal benefit, even though the individual has to give up some of his property rights. One of them is like this, that during the winter, because of the rain and the snow, wherever you are, there are certain craters that opened up in the ground. And as the summer months came in, when it dried, sometimes not only was there little holes in the ground, but there were little protrusions that the Mishnah, the Brisa, calls pegs. This is before the asphalt, which made traveling difficult. Then there's something even worse. Sometimes it's muddy and you sink into it. That's even worse. Says Yeshua, our Yeshua, and really we learned in the Gemara, it's not only for Eretz Yisrael, he gave it for Yidden, that if you own a field on the side of these roads, and if you have these pegs that are protruding, which makes the travel on it difficult, even though you didn't give permission, the travelers are allowed, if it's only pegs, they can go on your property, not where you planted stuff. If there is a quicksand or if it's muddy and you're sinking in, then, which is much more dangerous, even if you planted all the way up into the road, which means if people are going to deviate on your private property, they're going to be ruining that which you planted. Even if you planted tarkoin, that's the example that Tanoim gave, saffron, expensive, they can walk on it because it's dangerous for them to walk. Okay, that's the, so that says the Bryce. That mitztalken litzdadim, that a traveler is allowed to go on the side, guys, not on produce, but still not, but not they're walking on your property without your reshus. Mipnei yisei dois derachim. Yisei dois means if there are certain pegs or protrusions on the public thoroughfares. But l'tzedadim means they can go, but only to a point. They can go onto the sides if they're not ruining your produce. But if you're walking on the road, your feet will sink into the ground, your wheels will sink into the ground. There's blata. Ooh, that's even worse. Now Yeshua gave a bigger head. Afilu besada shimalea kurkimin. and you're going to be going on that person's kurkumin, you're going to be ruining his saffron, even that is allowed. Okay, that's the brais. Now, let's go again. What happens if a person wants to go beyond the letter of the law and they're not, and they don't want to do that? They don't want to walk on someone else's property. You would say, beautiful. 1 second. So let's go. And then we're going to put it back. We're going to read the Maharaf Fulda. He addresses this tsar or not tsar. Now, based on that halacha, now comes the story. Amar Ababo. So to wissen sein, that in the times of the Tanoi, Maisa, the Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, and we know this pair, right? Show you about that. They were walking, and indeed, that's what happened. Now, as we'll see in a moment from the story, the road that they were on, in some portions of it, there were only this Yeseidos, which allowed them to go on the Tzedadim, not on produce. And in other parts of the road, the road was so brachen from the season, from the rainy season, that your feet would actually sink into the ground. Did they behave beyond the letter of the law? No, they didn't. They were traveling. They of course, they kept the dinim. They were not noyeg b'mei this chasidus because of the Yeseidos. Why mistalkel l'tzedadim and pnei seizera. And they're walking. Who's coming in the opposite direction? A Jew by the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Pappus. Right? He's not the head of the Sanhedrin of Yavna. He's not the great Rabbi Yeshua. Now, Shahoya, he was punked on a place, on a road where it was not only bad because there were pegs, it was mamish, it was quicksand, or there was some sort of softness of the road that was causing his feet or his wagon or his fed to sink into the ground. Shoy mishtakeya. However, this Rabbi Yehuda ben Pappus was going beyond the letter of the law. He did not go litzidadim. He would even be allowed to go on top of produce. He stepped on the road. Now there's one more layer over here. What's the other layer? First of all, he was having tsar. Based on what we learned, based on this brisa, he was choosing to go beyond the letter of the law, but he was paying a price for it. It's hard to travel that way. You would think it's allowed, even though he wasn't on that madrega. I'm speaking out the Maraf Fulda, but there's another side. You know what the other side is? When you are on a road, at the same time you have these two Tanoim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, and they are not going beyond the letter of the law. You going beyond the letter of the law is very, very, very show off. I'm greater than them. Very good. Okay. And that's why Rabbi Gamliel got upset. So Omar Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua, mi hu zeh. Guys, look at this beautiful expression. Shemara atzmoi be'etzba, who was pointing at himself with the finger, means, look at me. Look how great I am. I am not going l'tzedadim. He's announcing how great he is. He wanted to know who he is. Amaloi Rabbi Yeshua tells him it's Yehuda ben Pappus. But don't be upset at him. No. Shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. No, there's no yuhara. He's takadir. Amar lei Rabbi Gamliel tells Rabbi Yeshua v'loi chein tanei. But did we not learn in Abraisa that kol davar shuhu shel shvach, that any behavior that only elicits praise, loi kol arotza lasois atzmai, guys, turning to Naflam and Alpha Beis Yachid Oisa. Nor you may not say, I want to be like a Talmud Chacham Oisa. Elam kein minu Oisa parnas ala tzibur, and that's not the case. And that's not the case with Ram Papa. So again, but you get the problem with the problem. The problem is, how can you call it shvach? So before you turn over, go back to Lamed Aleph Amud. So the Marafulda says, the second to last line in the Amud. Ha'af al-gav says the Marafulda. The Bedover shal tsar. You see it, the Rabbi Blauner, all the way in the bottom, Mamash in the bottom, the last mefoida share of the whole thing. Af al-gav the shal tsar kolorates lots of atzmai Talmud Chacham Oisa. Hache. The Af HaTalmud Chacham leinoig boy. The Talmud Chacham is Rabbi Gamliel. The Talmud Chacham is Rabbi Yeshua. Here, that they in this moment they did not do so. Nase kedavar shel shvach, and that's why Rabbi Gamliel was telling Rabbi Yeshua what he's doing is not right. Amalei, Rabbi Yeshua is protecting him. And what was he telling him? V'hatani, he's telling him that I know that we are walking on the road. You know, what's Marafuld explained what was even the side of Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yeshua's side is, no, we learned in the Braisa that when you have tsar, you can be noyeg beyond the letter of the law, so don't be upset at him. Or in the cases where Chazal used the expression Talmud Chacham, oisa. And not only that, so not only should you not be upset at him, that's very important. Okay. No. So obviously you have Kol Ma'aseh L'Shem Shemayim, then you have a Yachid, the Yachid of Tainus, the Yechidim, then you have a Talmud Chacham. How to have all these madregas applied, I have no idea. But just because Kol Ma'aseh Shemayim, let me tell you in the reverse, how, for example, in the Chabad community, we don't sleep in a sukkah. And because the Rebbe doesn't sleep in a sukkah. The Rebbe doesn't sleep in a sukkah because the Rebbe is aware of the Makiv de Bina. Am I aware of Makiv de Bina? Halavai, I should remember Mizal Gedenken after 30 years being not a yeshiva bacher that the words Makifim de Bina. We don't behave more frum than the Rebbe. We don't behave more frum than the Rebbe. That's a big thing. And even not in the Rebbe's presence. Okay. Says the Gemara. Omar Abzeiro. Now, this is something that Vlad, you mentioned. That you know, when you read this, Taka, why was Rabbi Gamliel upset? Because aside of the issue of Yuhara, your words, he's ashamed. You know, it's the fact that these two Tanoim, they did everything al pi halacha. Was there an inyan to go lefimi? Could be. The fact that Rabbi Gamliel Yeshua chose to go on the Tzudadim, him going on the road, not only is he showing off, he's ashaming the others. That's why Rabbi Gamliel was objected to it. Amar Abzeira, ubel chayv, even when you are allowed, or you said by tsar you are allowed. Deloy yivzeh, Hashemnish, don't embarrass an Adam Aleph many times, right? An ached. Choyranen means don't embarrass the others. Okay. Says the Gemara Doma. Here again, Doma means either itmer. Doma here also can be in a mice. Yeah, but not. I think every case is a case. Like I'm doing it in my shul, but in the presence of the Rebbe, Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi. Rabbi Yeshua was almost the Nasi, right? If that's the whole story, you know, when Rabbi Gamliel got demoted, who was the first person they wanted to appoint? Rabbi Yeshua. We're speaking about the greatest Tanoim. In their presence, you're going to be from the Rebbe Daven Shmoina Esrei. I remember, whether right or wrong, the Baltfila in 770, beautiful, beautiful. You can hang me. The moment the Rebbe finished Shmoina Esrei, no matter where he was at, he began Chazoras Hashatz. I'm going to daven longer than the Rebbe. The Greise Kavanas. Whether that's halachically correct, I don't know. But that's covered to the Rebbe. That's already getting into a controversy. But Baruch Hashem, I always remember that. Abramov, whatever his name was, he was such a good Baltfila. Then he had a red beard. Beautiful. Abramovich. Oh.
So also, the Rebbe would be waiting for him then.
I know that. It wasn't just for the Rebbe not to wait for him. It's like this whole...
It's inappropriate. Right.
Careful. Yeah. Okay. Dolma says what? Dolma means itme. Dolma means a mice. That Rabbi Yasser, Rabbi Shmuel, Bar, Rabbi Yitzchak have a Yosvin. They were sitting, and Achlan, they were eating. Bechadam in inland Kanishta Elias. They were eating in, now either the taich will be they were eating in an attic in the shul. That's to resolve the issue. How can you eat in the shul? Or it was a shtibel, and you can eat in a shtibel. And it was a oif gohoivene, it was a lofty shtibel, and they were having a l'chaim. Osas inside Solois. Now they were eating, not just a l'chaim, they were having a meal. Now, guys, if you remember, we just had this not long ago. There are certain behaviors that you should not start nearing the time of mincha, which is 30 minutes before mincha. Don't start. If you already started, if you can finish it and still have time to daven, you don't stop. One of the 5 things is daven. Is don't start a meal prior to mincha ketana. Yeah, but if you started the meal again, people ate. They ate not like they ate. It was like a meal. But as long as you know you'll finish the meal like the way you would eat the meal, take you an hour, you would still have time to daven mincha. You don't have to stop. So these guys were eating. Al Pidin, they didn't have to stop. The Kam Rab Shmuel Bar Rab Yitzchak and Mitzloya, he davened. He was the one that went to daven. From Amalei Rab Miyasha, Loi Kain Alpha Rebbe. Rebbe is not him. Rebbe was Rabbeinu HaKadosh. They were both Talmidim. This is the first era of Amiroim. In the Bavli, the Amiroim were in the earlier Amiroim. Some of them learned by Rebbe. Didn't Rebbe tell us? And that's the Mishnah. We learned this, that im ischilu ein mafsikin. And furthermore, so the answer was okay. It's just because you don't have to stop. No, v'tani chizkiyav that kol mishu pater midavar v'oiseyu nikra an idiot. Read it. Hediyot. In other words, this whole concept, don't go, why are you doing beyond the letter of the law? Oh, now we're going to come into this last topic, like I mentioned. So, Amalei. No. Don't criticize me. Because did we not learn in our Mishnah, Chas and Pater, nevertheless, Chatzanim writes. Now, here is what's important. And what he's saying is that in our Mishnah, who was the one that said that Chayshin and Liyohara? Guys, remember the version that we hold up. That was Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that says, not everyone who wants to make for himself a good name can do it. The Tanakama doesn't have a name. So he's saying, since Rebbe wrote the Tanakama without an author, which means it's Stam, halachic is Stam Mishnah. Fakir, the Stam Mishnah says that you could say the Shema. I could have a mincha. So Amalei, Ramayasha tells him, no. That I know that the Tanakama, the law, the Rabban Gamliel, this is the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. What did Rabbi Gamliel do? Guys, what did we learn on that Chav Zayin on the base? Rabbi Gamliel said the Shema, right? Rabbi Gamliel said the Shema. What is he trying to say from over here? Yes, it's a Stam Mishnah, but since we know that this Stam Mishnah is not Das Rabbim, it's only Das Yachid. So you can't pass in Kistam Mishnah. No, this is the big debate over here. The rule that we pass like a Stam Mishnah. On the other hand, Yachid v'Rabim, Halachic Rabim. What happens if they're conflicting? You're fadem zich. No, I pass like the Stam Mishnah. But this Mishnah Halacha test comes after Halacha Vav. From Halacha Vav, we already know that who's the author, who holds that you could say the Shema if you're up. Only Rabban Gamliel, which means not Das Rab. So Amalei. Yachil Ano Pasad Keram Gamliel. You're right. Our Mishnah is following Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel was the one that said, Eini Shomei Lechem Levatli Meni Malchus Shamayim. Nevertheless, he's saying this is the ending of this Pedic. This is Gavaldik. I don't care if it's a Das Yachid. The rule, guys, that's the way we're learning Pshat. The rule that we paskin like a Stam Mishnah is even if it's a Das Yachid. Like, why wouldn't Rebbe write, instead of writing a Tanakama without a name, let him write that Divrei Rabban Gamliel, that if you want to say the Shema. And Rabban Gamliel says, he didn't write that. Why did he not write it? Adarabba. We already know from Halacha Vav that this is the sheet of Rabban Gamliel. We know it's Das Yachid. Doesn't matter. And more than that, remember the Mishnah Vav? Who challenged Rabban Gamliel? It says, they challenged him. Did you not teach us? We know from Halacha Vav that the Roiv were against it. The Roiv were with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. We know that from there. Doesn't matter. Even when Yachid v'Rabim, generally Halacha Kerabim, if Rebbe in the Mishnayos wrote even only a Das Yachid without attributing it to its author, Rebbe is telling us Halachic is Stam Mishnah and Halach is Stam Mishnah. That what the Chassan is allowed to say it. When Loi Chashin Liyohara. Same thing by them. That's why I have the right. You're not davening mincha. I have the right to daven mincha. However, one thing remains that if his davening mincha would have been shaming the others, then it would be problematic. That was not the case in our story because he was sitting with Chavedim. If two Chavedim, one guy decides to go beyond the letter of the law, he doesn't shame the other. The story we had before was that Yehuda ben Pappus and Rabbi Gamliel. And Gamliel was the Rebbe. Rabbi Shua was the second in command, so to say. That's different. And on that we say, perfect, God willing, we will start tomorrow.
Rabbi, so is that the halacha that people can't say it?
The halacha is that people could say it. I want to add, okay, I'm happy you're bringing it up. There's one more nuance over here. What do we do today? So the Charedim, I should have read the Charedim. Charedim writes, he quotes from the Maramei Rothenburg, which is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, that since nowadays we don't have big Havana anyways, he writes that if you won't read it, that's showing off. Because what are you saying? What are you saying if I don't read it? The whole year I have Kavanah. How I'm about to get married? I can't have Kavanah. Now I won't say it. The whole year you don't have Kavanah. So if again, because of the issue that you're not allowed to behave in a way where it looks like you're boasting, you have to say the Shema even the night that you get married. You don't have to daven with the minyan. Correct. You're fine, David. Those finished. Huh?